Hi everybody, it's Sandy Smith-Leva and this is Brain Food for Accounting Leaders, week number 2. So let's see what we have for you this week. We have something called grit, and this affects your performance. It affects how much you can get done, your productivity, and really how far you go. This is work from a lady named Angela Duckworth, and grit is a key characteristic that must be present for success. As a matter of fact, grit is actually more important than IQ. It's a correlation indicator. So what it means is grit is a combination of hard work and persistence. And persistence is really, really important. Having that stamina toward the long-term goal, toward the hard work you need to do to becoming an entrepreneur. The higher you have grit, the more grit you have, the more successful you will be. So I think it's absolutely fascinating that this is an indicator of success, more important than IQ or anything else, grit, because everybody can get more grit. So you can actually get your grit score. And this is going to be a short one because I want you all to go get your grit score and see whether you need to increase it or whether you have a pretty high grit score. And there's the URL right there, which I think is very cool. So if you don't have a lot of grit, you can get some by just creating optimism. We'll talk more about optimism in a future call because it's so important for mindset. And just, feeling like you can do this instead of saying I can't do this, feeling like you can. And then attention regulation is another way to increase grit, and that's a fancy phrase for just focusing and reducing the number of distractions that you have and just really focusing on a single goal or the work at hand. Emotion regulation is another way to increase grit. That's a fancy term for being able to bounce back, being able to control the negative emotions and move them into positive emotion as soon as possible, and that's something else you can control. You can practice something called resilience, which allows you to come back from crises faster. You know how some people just bounce back no matter what horrible thing happens to them, and other people just wallow and get depressed and get clinically ill. And so there are ways to learn how to bounce back from those crises much faster. And people who have higher grit and higher ability to move from negative to positive are going to increase their grit. And then correspondingly increase their success, in the entrepreneurial world. Behavior regulation is another one, stopping from the next bright, shiny objects and having persistence in moving toward the goal and not getting sidetracked, the tortoise, not the hare type of race. And then also delayed gratification, where, again, you're removing distractions and you're working toward a longer-term goal. So those are ways that you can increase grit. We'll have more on some of those in future webinars and future little podcast things. So I'm sure all of you guys have been stopped by a no. I certainly have, where you have a client tell you no and you end up like not even producing the product. This has happened to me where someone said, oh, I don't know if anybody would be interested in that. And I'm just like, that 10 years ago, that was enough to stop me, to get totally stopped. And when you have grit, you don't get stopped by those no's as often. So take a look at where you might have gotten stopped by a no that maybe you shouldn't have listened to so hard, and maybe then it would help you a little bit more to increase your grit and move toward that long-term goal. And then also something we call the bright, shiny object syndrome, getting sidetracked is another thing. If we're working so hard and, it takes a while to realize the profits and the profitability from some of the things that it takes to be a small business owner. And sometimes we can get distracted by some kind of get-rich-quick thing that really isn't a get-rich-quick, but we think it is. So it delays us from really getting toward our success. So when we can kind of not be stopped by those things, then we increase our grit and we increase our ability to be more successful. So the action for this week is to notice grit, to notice the presence or absence of grit in your life. Take the test, and then make a plan to increase it if you need. And we'll have more Brain Food series on resilience and also one on mindset in the future that will help you increase your grit as well.